Hi, I'm Tina-Desiree reporting for Status Coup News. This week, I am interviewing a very special guest, Josie Caballero, who is the, let me get this all straight, director of the U.S. Transgender Survey for the National Center for Transgender Equality Action Fund. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to talk to you because obviously trans rights are becoming very politicized right now. And we are in a very precarious position in the country where we have a lot of literal Nazis coming to transgender things to just protest that, saying hateful things. We have, the TERF segment that is sort of enabling that. And at the same time, though, there are some positive fronts in politics, which is what I want to open the interview about. There was Washington Post conducted a survey with the Kaiser Family Foundation that took a look at folks that have transitioned and the fact that they are much happier and living more fulfilled lives after the fact. So this is a positive result, but welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about your organization right off the top.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. If we can remember, I used to do District 53 a while back.
Or yeah, 34. Yes, yeah.
34, that's right. 34, wow.
You were running for office at the time, yeah, so I've interviewed you in your past. Yep.
Yes, in my past. I always say Josie before the I. But anyways, the National Center for Transgender Equality Action Fund is the largest policy organization, lobbying organization for trans people run by trans people. We're also known for our, flagship service, which is the U.S. Transgender Survey, which happened in 2015, and we had about 27,000 trans and non-binary folks take the survey back then. The U.S. Trans Survey in 2022 was done back in December. We finished fielding it, and we are currently analyzing the largest data set that has ever existed. Can't tell you the exact number yet because we're still cleaning and analyzing that data, but we're very excited by just the amount of demographics across the board for trans people who reside in the United States and its territories.
So how did you find individuals to poll? Did you just put out like general public bulletins, like if you are a part of this community, come talk to us, or what went into that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually a 2-year process of really outreaching to the community. As you know, with the trans community, trust is extremely important because of what is going on in the country, like you said at the top of the show. So we had to build trust in the community. So one of the things that we said, this is a community-led survey by trans people for trans people. And we've had national partners, we had a national outreach council, and we communicated with as many small organizations across the country that were trans oriented as possible, from state groups to small Facebook groups, right? Okay. We were trying to get everywhere and anywhere possible to connect with the individuals. And in the indigenous populations, we actually had people with tablets go door to door to people who they knew may not have had internet connectivity. So it was a community-wide effort, and I believe that's what speaks to the success of how many respondents we had at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important. I think a lot of the pushback that we see in the world against trans rights is because people simply don't understand. They've been raised maybe with some puritanical or patriarchal viewpoint of both, not just gender, but I'm saying biological sex, which is not, if they've been told since the 1970s and earlier that it's binary, there's female, male, and nothing in between, which is completely not true, right? We now know through genetics that there is a variant degree of biological sex. But some of these things, these ideas, they take time for people to sort of accept, especially if they've been raised in a, really stern environment. And I think right now, because trans rights have been coming to the forefront of the conversation for multiple years, there's this massive pushback that is surfacing in response, this reactionary. Would you say that's about right?
Well, I will say that trans people have been here since the beginning of civilization.
100%, exactly.
And we have been emperors and empresses and, all the way from, gladiators to everything, right? We've been across the spectrum throughout history. We are there. And Okay, froze again. Sorry. So essentially, what we have to do is realize that this is the most extreme. We're talking about the most extreme wings of the Republican Party that is trying to find a group to hate. And we are doing our best just to live our lives. And a lot of times they're trying to say, oh my gosh, there's this increasing number of trans people coming out. Well, it's like this in history. When things become more accepted in society, people can start living their truth. I always like to point to the left-handed graph back in the 1800s, where left-handed people were seen as degenerate or devil worshippers. They like, teachers would go and slap kids' hands with a ruler, saying if they were writing with their left hand. And the left-handed rate back then was about 2%. Right. But as soon as all the myth and mystique about being a left-handed person went away, it shot up, right? The amount of left-handed people all the way to stick right at 12%, where we are currently right now in society. It wasn't because people just decided to pick up a pen with their left hand for the first time. Right. It was because it was accepted for the first time.
And they could just talk about
hide it.
Right.
Exactly.
I agree with you.
Right?
I agree with you. Yeah.
So that's why I think people are taking an opportunistic shift of society's acceptance of trans people and now trying to weaponize it to win political favor.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with any of that. In fact, many of the ancient languages have third pronouns embedded in them. So we do know that trans has been with us since the dawn of man. I'm having a flashback to a movie that came out in the early 90s called Beautiful Boxer. I don't know if you've seen this film. I recommend more and more people to see this film. Even though it's an older film, it is based on a real life story of a Thai boxer who was transgender. Went on to win multiple rounds gets to the top of the Thai boxing field as a transgender woman. And, along the way, obviously takes some heat, takes some punches, but she had her revenge in the ring, right? So it culminates in this, basically the story where, people were, because she was boxing with makeup on and whatnot. And she would wear heels and then take the heels off, the whole 9 yards. But she was a phenomenal boxer. And so it culminates in a boxing round with a guy that had been calling her, pussy or equivalent kind of names and whatever. And she knocks the dude out in like 3 rounds and you can't help but cheer.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, I think it's a great film because not only is it based on reality and truth, but it sort of brings a human quality to what it means to be transgender and what that's like, because it takes you back from the beginning where the mom notices that her son, at the time son boy, is playing with makeup when he is quite young, starts dressing in women's clothes at 7 or 8, like so. And she says, I always knew that, and they do in the Thai language have a word for this, so it's much more accepted, even though there's always parts of society that clearly don't accept it, the more sort of patriarchal macho side. But I think more stories like that are important, which is why I think this Washington Post piece, based on your survey, is really important, because one of the things it highlights is that...
I will say it's not based on our survey.
Oh, I thought it was.
It's a Washington Post survey that they did nationally. That was their own study.
Oh, okay. I thought Kaiser and Washington Post worked with you guys on some of the same underlying information. Please explain that.
They may have used some of the benchmarks. They may have used some of our questions that kind of help, comparability between data sets. Okay. I was contacted by the Washington Post because we run the U.S. Trans Survey, which is the largest of its kind across the United States, to kind of compare notes.
I see. Thank you.
So that's why I was featured in, or our organization was featured in the actual Washington Post article. So I just wanted to clarify our data set.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, that wasn't clear to me. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. There'll be a lot of fanfare when ours comes out later this year.
Oh, no doubt, because it's a much broader survey. So one of the things I want to highlight is that it's really obvious that folks that have gone through the process of transitioning and are living who they feel they actually are much happier.
Yes, absolutely. And, and we've had study after study show that this is the case. From the U.S. Transgender Survey in 2015, we showed that mental health outcomes are more positive when somebody is my internet connection. I'm so sorry, but I'll stay on. But I'm sorry for all the extra edits that you're having to do.
I know.
So
it's okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Can I tell you though? Every time I interview somebody from San Diego, it does this. It's freaking internet in San Diego. It's terrible. Okay.
I'm in DC.
Oh, did you move?
Yes, I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland. Yeah.
Well, never mind. There goes that theory.
Yes. It's just my crap internet. It's sorry. It's okay. You can blame it on me. Okay. So when we talk about the fact that when you're accepted by one person, friend or family, we see that mental health outcomes dramatically improve for young trans folks or just anybody who is trans in particular. And what the Washington Post survey what the Washington Post survey shows is the evidence that is what we've always known, is that people's lives get better. My life has improved. Many people that I know personally, anecdotally, lives have improved. And we can just see it across the board how trans acceptance is the most important thing when it comes to making people's lives markedly better. And, when you were talking about the emotional appeal earlier about just trans people are normal humans, right? And we are your friends, your daughters, your siblings, your children, your family, your leaders. Like, we are all over society. And Trans Day of Visibility is coming up just in a few days, and it can't be underestimated the power of visibility and showing trans people thriving, trans people with joy, people showing that, hey, I'm trans and I'm okay with that. And I love that. It's just an interesting fact about me, but now I get to live my truth all the time.
Absolutely. And it is a truth. I think I'm more not fazed by some of this stuff because I grew up with a trans individual in my closer, not primary family circle, but secondary family circle. So I've known what that is. And also in my 20s, I was friends with somebody that was intersex. This was an individual, for folks that don't know this language, an individual born with variant degrees of both sex organs. So this individual had parents that didn't decide at birth what to do about it and let now her decide what she was going to be when she was old enough to be able to match her psychology to her physical being. So there's all kinds of ways. Human biology is very complicated.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the arguments against trans individuals that we see from the right wing are the same exact race realist arguments that you see from people that want to hold on to the idea of biological race, even though that too is vacuous, right? We're all human beings. Biology is complicated. I call it the spread of excellence, meaning that you have a spread of various traits that occur on a spectrum, and it's excellence across the board. There's not one there's no hierarchy here. Nothing's better than anything else. It's just differences. Right. It's just variation.
And a lot of the rhetoric that comes from like these extremists on the other side here is the fact that they try to essentialize sex and gender to being the same thing. Gender is a completely different thing than sex. Right. And no trans person anywhere is trying to deny the fact that sex is real and it exists, right? I wouldn't be going through medical transition if I didn't understand the fact that I was assigned male at birth, right? Like these are very fundamental things. And when we talk about gender, we are able to essentially see that it's beyond what sex is. And this is something that I like to say a lot. Right? This is something that I like to say a lot, is that my internal sense of what it is to be a woman is very rigid and strong because I had to go through the gauntlet of 34 years trying to deny that fact about myself. And for me to have to go through hell, losing family that I'll never speak to again, friends I'll never have again, like I lost career opportunities that disappeared. And one of the reasons why I moved across the country, like these things actually happened, right? But at the end of the day, like I allowed those things to continue and I pursued and persisted to know that this is who I am.
Yeah,
And it goes beyond what genitals I have or how I was raised at
absolutely it
birth and
does.
all of those things. And so when a cis person, person who is assigned, the sex and they are the gender that
Right.
they say they are, at that's congruent, when you ask them if you're a woman or a man, a lot of times it does go, oh, I have a penis or I have a vulva. And it's like, but is that really it though?
No, it's
Right?
not.
Like,
It's again, biology is complicated. Yeah.
exactly, right? And it's like beyond biology, right? I think it's just the gender identities that we are. And,
No,
and I think
100%.
that,
So
yeah,
I
go
want
ahead.
to talk about that for a second so folks can understand. I wasn't meaning to get into science today, but let's talk a little bit about the science because I think it does help to, for folks to understand how this happens. If you've been raised in this sort of rigid, patriarchal or puritanical, highly religious environment, these might be new concepts, right? And just going against everything that you've been told. But, there's scientists like Dean Hamer is coming to mind right now, who have worked in this area, and the psychology of your gender is very much also attributable to things that happen in your body, right? For example, you are sexed with hormones in vitro and also at puberty. And it is not uncommon for you to be sexed with the opposite hormone of what your actual biological sex is, right? So this too is a form of variation, right? So my point is that there's so many complex things that happen. Nothing is hardwired in biology. And there are reasons, also environmental, that you feel the way you feel. And I don't think any of those things should be judged as being bad or wrong just simply because they're different. And I think a lot of what's driving the rhetoric against trans folks, whether it's a TERF that's a liberal or a right-wing extremist Nazi, is that they're uncomfortable with it, right? I think it's just that simple. They are uncomfortable, so they're having a visceral reactionary response because, and then, sometimes it goes to very bad extremes. Maybe we should talk about that. So right-wing extremists, let's talk about this for a second. They're taking it beyond the TERFs. Like the TERFs are just saying, unless you're born exactly with, and I've seen all kinds of weird definitions that never seem to hold up muster. One of them is that women can give birth. And I'm like, that's absolutely not true. There are plenty of women that have uteruses that are not able to give birth. That's just a fact.
Right.
Women menstruate. And I'm like, but do they? What happens after menopause? All of a sudden now they're no longer women? What are they? So, people want to put hardwired things into boxes, and it just doesn't work for human biology. But now the right-wing extremists, they're taking it to the next level in ways that are just shocking to me. One of the things they want to claim is that all trans individuals are pedophiles, which is insane. What are your feelings and thoughts on that?
Well, it's to put trans people into a box of degeneracy that don't require human rights at all. Like, it's like, oh, these people are sub the affording of life. We shouldn't exist because we're a danger to children. These arguments have been used in genocides across the entire world from time of civilization, since we've been having genocides, unfortunately. And the conversation of like that we're degenerate is not any different from what they used to say about Black people in this country. It's no different what the Nazis used to say about Jewish people. It's no different than what the Rwandan genocide rhetorics were. All of those things all stem from a distaste, discomfort, and just absolute abhorrent hatred for another class of person, just for the sake of doing that. And when they use that dehumanizing language, it's easier for them to discriminate against us and take our rights away. And it's that rhetoric that is extremely dangerous. It has caused death and violence across this country, and it is only going to continue to escalate. We just had, unfortunately, Eden Knight in the DC area here was detransitioned and sent to Saudi Arabia, and then she took her own life. Right? Like, she was somebody in our community that we enjoyed and we loved, and she was tricked to go back there. And it's tragedy. This is violence. So when we talk about detransitioning people forcefully, and that's what these state laws are doing in some places, over 450 of these laws and bills, is they want to forcibly detransition people. And that is violence. That will end life. And that's the point, right? That's not the bug, that's the feature. and we have to be able to fight back and stop this, because it is the extreme. Because most people really don't mind. It's like yeah,
Right.
they're just trans individuals. And and I want to bring it back to what you said about comfortability, right? I call it comfortability politics,
Okay.
right? And I think it's trash. I think it's awful that people are trying to justify their comfortability of their own space around them to justify the completely denial of somebody's existence, right?
Right.
And a lot of these arguments stem from that. And nowhere in our history has it ever been like, oh, we're going to try to be like super comfortable to this one group of people. And when it has, it
Right.
usually leads to segregation and racism, sexism, and all of the isms that you can imagine.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. It's about dividing us, separating us, and trying
That's
to say
right.
that one is better than the other. And that's where comfortability politics come from, because it comes from the presupposition that there is something uncomfortable about somebody existing in their space, which is inherently wrong.
Right. And I think it's also what drives some of the TERF rhetoric. And for folks that don't know what a TERF is, these are women that think female spaces are only for a very narrow, trans exclusionary, radical feminist, basically. So obviously trans women aren't women in their rhetoric. That's a big one for them. But I feel like it's what is driving their responses too. They're uncomfortable. A lot of these women are older and they're part of the boomer generation. They feel like they had to fight really hard for their feminist values, and that I've seen them say things like, these are men trying to come back into our spaces, which is ludicrous.
We've always been there. Trans people have been there forever.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many trans people that they've interacted with in so many ways of their lives that they had no idea. It's just for the first time they're alerted to it.
Yeah.
Because before it was just like, oh, I'm just living my life. These are just people around me, like we always do as humans.
Right.
But
Right.
now, because they're like hyper vigilant, everybody around them is trans. And, and what we've seen is an increase in not just trans violence, but cis women violence, that people think that they're trans, right? We've seen, masculine
yes.
presenting cis women
That's
getting kicked
right.
out of bathrooms, being
Right.
harassed publicly because people are like transvestigating and thinking that cis people are trans people, and then
I've
take
had
away
this
their
happen to me. In
rights.
fact, I had a group of right-wing extremists in San Diego had decided that not only was I Antifa press, but also a trans person.
Yeah.
And I was sent these screenshots of some chat room where they were talking about that I was trans and I should be targeted for it, and how could they dox me? And I was just like reading this going like, really?
Yeah. And
this
and
is
you
where
think
we
about
are.
it this way, though. Think about it this way. That one interaction, now amplify that to every day of every hour of a person's life, and that's what a trans person's life is like.
Well, that's exactly right, which is why I felt like, for me, I'm like, well, it's better they target somebody like me, a cis woman, versus somebody that actually is trans and might suffer the consequences physically
Yes.
of being harmed for this. So, but it just gives you an idea of where these folks are at. So, in the last 2 weeks, we've seen multiple, literal in Ohio, of course, we had some neo-Nazis. In Australia, we had some neo-Nazis. And when we say neo-Nazis, Josie, they're neo-Nazis. They are, holding swastika flags. One of them had a sign from White Lives Matter that said Weimar Solutions, which is kind of wild. So, we briefly talked about how the Nazis targeted, various outsider groups, and they did target trans individuals. It wasn't just Jewish folks that were sent to Holocaust camps. It was those that were mentally...
With trans people.
That's right. Trans people are mentally impaired.
They started it by burning down, a clinic that was studying, people who were trans and people with sexual orientations that were different from straight. Like, they started their entire propaganda arm going after queer and trans folks, right? And then it just kind of escalated to the next group, right?
Right.
And
That's right.
So it is always been this way. That's why trans people are unfortunately the canary in the coal mine a lot of times. So when these TERFs, these trans exclusionary radical feminists think that we're taking their rights away, they need a history lesson. It was actually trans women that gave a lot of the rights that cis women have today, especially queer lesbian women, in fact, because when we were at Stonewalls, we were at the Stonewall protest or the cafeteria riot, trans women were the first people to get the baton across their head, while lesbians got to get rights after walking over our bleeding bodies. That's the reality. right? And so the fact is that they're trying to exclude us from the movement that we helped forge with our blood and our bodies on the line is hate. It's beyond despicable, because the reality is, if you were a feminist, you would fight for trans women, because when you give trans people generally, the rights of human dignity, then you will be surprised how quickly everybody else's dignity gets better. If we pass the Equality Act, it doesn't just give rights to, gay and trans folks. It also gives and strengthens rights for sexism. So I guess against sexism, it strengthens the protections against racism. Like, it actually strengthens the laws as a whole, because it makes it more uniform to just affording human rights. That's what they are. So when you are fighting against trans people, you are fighting against your own fundamental human rights, because that's what we're doing. That's all we're asking for. When a trans person argues on this against one of these bills, what are they asking for? They're asking for doctor prescribed transition related health care. Like, this isn't like something that's like ooga booga voodoo, right? This is just this is just complete healthcare. That's it. It's just making sure everybody has the right to see a doctor and and have the decisions with the privacy of a doctor, which is what I thought America was about.
Children's Hospital of Orange County has been targeted by a group of right-wing extremists multiple times now with protests, because they do have a transgender intersex section of the hospital where they work with clinic. So, and I went down and I covered one of these protests, and it was mind-numbing for some of these doctors that came out of their conference, and they would come up to me and they're like, who are these people? What are they talking about? I'm like, basically they're saying you are a pedophile because you are providing intersex children with healthcare. And the doctor was like, are you kidding me right now? Do they have any idea what they're even talking about? I'm like, no, they don't. But that's sort of tangential to the point, isn't it? They're reactionary, right? They have these religious, and I'm going to say it, they're religious viewpoints of that you're either male or female, there's nothing in between, and if you're not, you're a pedophile. At the same time, can we point out something that is just this gaping problem, for me at least? Obviously the Catholic priests that have been engaged in child pornography and molestation is a big story. Southern Baptist Convention, also a prominent amount of these individuals were engaging in child pornography and child molestation. But you know what other group has a higher amount of this? Neo-Nazis. We have seen arrests of neo-Nazis, whether it's from Atomwaffen Division, the base, a Groyper now. I have a whole list of them, where these guys were arrested with child porn on their laptops and phones. It's sort of an ancillary charge or point that's not really discussed as a broader picture item. But a part of me is like, are you guys just, engaging in an Olympic level projection because you're accusing people that have done absolutely zero pedophilia, none, as being pedophiles, when in your own myths in between where you guys are right now, there's huge amounts of people that you're associating with that actually are engaging in child porn.
Yeah, and it just shows how vacuous their rhetoric is, right? Like, they don't care about the hypocrisy. They just want to label us as bad people, right? They know that they're doing bad things. They know people on their side are doing bad things. And we're starting to see some rebound effects happening across the country, where now teachers are not able to talk about straight things sometimes, or now, teachers aren't, like, there are now challenges to the Bible with all these bannings, because they made it so easy for parents to put a challenge and things like that. So we're starting to see this ricochet effect, but really it comes down to the fact that they are creating these extremist people are putting a label on us, not looking at their own home, trying to say, look over there, because we want to make sure that we subjugate them, so we don't have to actually work on legislative policy, right? They want to focus on look over here, while I have nothing going on with the economy. I have nothing going on with public school protections. We're not doing anything for our infrastructure, our environment, all of these things, actual pressing issues, right? Pressing issues. And over here, we're talking about 4 trans students in Utah, not allowing them to participate in sports, right? Like, these are the conversations of the intellectual right. right? Like this is what's happening, and we have to push back because this extremist group is taking over the party.
They are taking over the conversation. They're taking over the party. And they're being enabled by like some groups on the left that might have maybe not as hardcore opinions of things, but also a level of uncomfortability. Which how was this word you came up with? Because it's great.
Comfortability politics.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I want to go back to the Washington Post piece because some of this data is really interesting. Yes. So many have been harassed or verbally abused. That goes without saying. We see that a lot. But I want to bring this part up. They've been kicked out of their homes, denied health care, and accosted in bathrooms. A quarter, that's a huge amount, have been physically attacked, and about 1 in 5 have been fired or lost out on a promotion because of their gender identity. They are more than twice as likely as the regular population at large to have experienced serious mental health struggles, such as depression. Well, of course you would feel depressed if this is what you were, having to deal with. Yet, and here's the bottom line, yet most trans adults say transitioning has made them more satisfied with their lives. So the fact that you have all of these negatives, right? Quarter of them are attacked, losing their jobs, whatever. You're still willing to want to live your truth. Tells me that this is something that is really important and key to who you are essentially, right? It's not something that you're just doing on a whim, as some people would like to say.
The closet is suffocating, right? Like at the end of the day,
the closet is suffocating. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like it's either die in the closet, right, by your own, sadness, right, or try to be a statistic and try to avoid these situations and be the 3 out of the 4, right? But even that risk is more important. I mean, is not as important as our own identity, right? Right. And we're hoping it gets better, but these statistics line up exactly with what the U.S. Trans Survey said in 2015. Right. And that these statistics are very, very real, that you're accosted in public places, you're verbally assaulted, you're refused health care. There's so many situations, sexual assault, as well as, domestic violence. All of these things increase dramatically if you're a trans person. But yet we will be trans because it makes us happier. Right.
That's exactly. It's the pursuit of happiness. A human, one of the most important human endeavors out there, right? If you're not happy, what is the point of anything else?
Absolutely. And I'll say it, because when I made my decision to be trans, it was a do or die situation. It was either I continue to live the lie that I've been telling myself or live. And it was that choice.
Yeah.
Live. And that was going to be live as a trans woman or die as a cis man. That was the choice that I had, because I couldn't do it anymore. And so I chose my truth, right? Because I've known I've been trans since 8 years old. Not trans, but I knew that I was supposed to be a girl. I knew that. I didn't know the words trans until much later, because I was born and raised in Texas. So there's a proof right there. If you try to hide it from children, it doesn't make it better. Right?
No, it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't.
It makes that person live in sadness longer before they find out, what? Why didn't
it's okay to be me?
Yeah, like if somebody would have said, "Hey, Josie, it'd have been okay if you don't want to be a boy and you're a girl." Oh, well, there we go. I'm going to do that then, right? It would have been as simple as that. But hiding it didn't make it better for me. Hiding it didn't prevent me from finding out the truth and discovering who I was, because this is discovery, right? We discover our trans identities in ourselves, just like we discover our sexualities, just like any person discovers who they are and what their ambitions are, who they are, how they want to portray themselves. All of that is discovery. People discover they may want to surf, right? People discover if they like skydiving, right? People discover these innate senses about themselves all the time. And that's what trans identities are and non-binary identities are. They're a self-discovery, and it should be celebrated.
It should be celebrated, not,
Right.
One last thing I want to bring up. So another thing that happens that I have a problem with is a lot of folks want to frame it as mental health, as a mental health issue, right? If you feel like you're the opposite of your genitalia, or what your visible genitalia is, let me put it that way, visible genitalia, meaning there could be other things going on there, but if that's the case, then you're mentally ill, which I think is really problematic. This is an argument that was at one time used against being homosexual, right? You must be mentally ill. No, you're not mentally ill. You just, aren't within what this person has decided are the norms, right? These are the norms of our little box here. And if you're outside of those norms, you must be mentally ill. No, that's not how it works. It's not mental illness. It's just something that you don't personally maybe understand or haven't been exposed to previously, right? So I think work like what the Washington Post and what you are doing is going to help, kind of broaden people's ideas of what these things are. But what do you say to folks that want to say you must be mentally ill? Like, what is your response to that?
So it's a really archaic way of thinking, right? So like you said, when people who were, gay, there was something wrong with them, right? And that usually happens in society. So when we like something different crops up, it's like, oh, this person must be weird if they don't want to be, the way the rest of society is. So they immediately throw it into a therapist chair, right? Or a psychologist. It's like, what's wrong with this person? Because there's obviously something wrong with them. And then everything becomes hyper medicalized. And then we realize, wait a minute, this isn't need to be this hyper medicalized. If you're gay, you're gay. Live
your life. It's not,
like it's not. Why do you need to see a doctor to get permission to be gay? It's really
no, you
silly,
don't. But
right?
you might need to see a doctor for the depression that you have because of the way people treat you.
Of society,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is not the same thing.
Yeah, it's not. And so like you got to think about like right now transition related healthcare is also going through this evolution as well of why does a trans person need to get a psychiatric evaluation to get a nose job and a cis person doesn't, right?
Oh,
why
that's wild. Is that a thing? I didn't even know that was a thing.
That's an actual thing, right? Like if you want to get anything that is involving your transition related healthcare, you have to get mental health care evaluations, in some cases 2.
I see.
And believe me, when I got my bottom surgery, I needed 2 letters from a psychiatric evaluation, and it's hard enough to find one person, regardless 2, right? Like it's very, very difficult. So essentially, like if you say as a cis woman, my boobs are too big and I need a reduction, doctor will say, okay, let's get you an appointment. Let's go and get it done. Cis trans woman says, or a trans man or a non-binary person says any of those things, I need a letter from your psychiatrist to make sure that you're doing this okay. It's so it's always been hyper medicalized when people can't have their own consent when they're adults. If you know that you don't want boobs, then don't have boobs, right? Like that it's really that simple. Cis people do it every day by the tens of thousands.
I hadn't really thought about that. That is true. Right? Again, these are things that cis people don't ever have to deal with, so you don't necessarily think about them.
Yeah, exactly, right? So like more people, so like talking about regret rate, right? When people talk about regret all the time, oh my gosh, we can't let these people have regret. So the regret rate right now is probably at the high end, maybe 1%, but I really say it's a half a percentage point, right?
So that's very low.
But if you were very low, now if you were to combine every single surgery in the world and put it into that same regret rate, including heart surgery, knee surgery, medical necessary surgeries that will save your life, it's 10%. So that
really?
People regret heart surgery more than people
really
regret their gender, their transition related healthcare surgery, right? Like that is the reality. And so all of the words and all of these things talk about medicalization, that we're mentally ill and we need to have all of these things done to make sure that we say who we say are, is a little bit much, to say the least. And we're not mentally ill. We have no mental disorder. The only thing is, I identify as a woman. So do you. Why is one considered a mental illness and the other isn't?
I don't have a problem with it. I have trans women that I know, several. And they are 100%.
I'm not making a claim.
No, I know you're not. I'm just saying it doesn't make me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so I wonder why it makes other cis women, and I have these conversations, right, with some other cis women, and I'm like, why does it make you uncomfortable? Is it simply that you just haven't met any trans women? I guarantee if you've met and exchanged, life experiences with them, you probably wouldn't feel the way you feel right now. You would realize like, oh man, this woman is just as much of a woman as I am, and they are welcome in my space.
Yeah.
I have never,
Yeah.
the violence I've ever seen at these trans things has never come from trans women. It's come from people that hate trans women. So this idea that
Absolutely.
trans women are invading female spaces and being violent is just nonsense. It's just more of
And
the
the
same.
thing is,
Yeah,
cis men do it already.
Oh,
cis men do it already. Like when I
true.
went to community college, back in forever ago, there was a woman who was murdered by her cis boyfriend
Right.
in the women's bathroom. Right? Like so
Yeah.
there isn't a situation where there's this force field in every bathroom everywhere where if you are a cis man you cannot walk into the bathroom. Those crimes already exist.
They do.
Women don't have like cis men go into women's spaces and cause violence all the time.
Right.
It's not trans women committing these crimes. It's not like if you're wearing a wig you now can sexually assault a cis woman in
Right.
the bathroom. That's not
I
it's
laugh,
like,
but
be
yeah, you're
trans,
right.
do
That's,
crime. Right? It's like, be trans, do crime. It's like, what? Like, that's not how it works.
That's not how it
like,
works, no.
We already have laws and criminal cases already
That's right.
about assault and abuse. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't
And
need to
most
be
of these-
politicized by making anti-trans laws. Yeah, I agree with you.
Exactly, right? So cis men have been going into cis women spaces and women's spaces.
So on that note,
Yes.
if folks want to read more about the survey, follow your work and keep up to date on this, and really just educate or learn more about what it means to be trans, like these sorts of things, I think there is a thirst for that in the world. Where's the best place for folks to get information from?
Yeah, absolutely. I will always plug transequality.org. That is, the National Center for Transgender Equality. It has a lot of great resources, such as identity documents. We also have the Action Fund that is there that will help you register to vote. When you're talking about, these margins to victory, right? I always talk about this because let's say there's about, let's say if it was 1% of the trans population existed in the United States. Let's just say 1% for the sake of argument. That's still 3.6 million people, right? Like how much a president went by, right? Like the fact of the matter is the trans vote can be the margin to victory in these really huge races that are statewide in some places as well as national. So we have a lot of political power. And so go get involved, be a part of your community safely. And register to vote. Make sure you bring a buddy to make sure that you're safe and go and do it together. I think that's a really, really powerful thing. You can also find me personally at Josie Rose C. That's Josie Rose with the letter C. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm also on Twitch for time to time. I haven't been able to do it very much these days, but I do it as a hobby as well. And I do talk a lot about trans issues there as well. And you can always follow us on all the trans equality handles as well.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us. Everybody, it's Trans Visibility Day coming up here. So I hope that this interview proves to be informative and helps folks understand a little bit about what's going on. Thank you for joining us.